Hello, my name is Martin Rowe and I am the Executive Director of the Culture and Animals Foundation. I'd like to share with you a project that the Culture and Animals Foundation is aiming to initiate. But first of all, here is a history of the Culture and Animals Foundation. The Culture and Animals Foundation, or CAF, was founded by Tom and Nancy Reagan in 1985 to sponsor artists, scholars and activists in our collective efforts to understand more deeply our fellow species and to further their rights. Tom taught philosophy at North Carolina State University for 34 years and in 1983 literally wrote the book on animal rights. Nancy was a librarian and art enthusiast. CAF's commitment to the arts began when Nancy saw the performance artist Rachel Rosenthal bring animals to the stage. She saw how art could open people's hearts and minds to the others with whom we share the earth. Over the next 2 decades, Tom and Nancy hosted the International Compassionate Living Festival, at which they gathered writers, scholars and artists of all kinds to share their work and provide inspiration. These included radical artist Sue Coe, feminist theoretician Carol Adams, poet Galway Kinnell, Francis Moore Lappé, the author of Diet for a Small Planet, theologian Andrew Lindsay, and Nobel laureate J.M. Coetzee, among many others. Today, CAF continues that legacy through its annual grants program, its yearly Tom Reagan Memorial Lectures, the fellowships it offers at NCSU's Animal Rights Archives, the Nancy Reagan Arts Prize, and our latest efforts, an audio documentary on 200 years of animal advocacy, and Chart 2050, a campaign to imagine the next 30 years for animals. The history of animal advocacy is long and storied, from the fabled pillars of the Emperor Ashoka to the 1641 Massachusetts Bay Colony's strictures against tyranny or cruelty towards any brute creatures which are usually kept for man's use. From William Hogarth's 4 stages of cruelty to the campaigns against vivisection, hunting and now factory farming, men and women have laboured to bring to light the suffering of animals at human hands and to end it. Until recently, we only had these activists' books or works of art to record their beliefs and campaigns on behalf of animals. Many famous and not so famous campaigners went to their graves with their insights unknown, their sense of the times unrecorded, and their strategic wisdom uncollected. This is the task of oral history, a vivid, dynamic form of recollection that captures the lived and felt experience of individuals to animate the past and help shape the future. Between 1999 and 2004, a group of activists, including me, interviewed 14 leading figures in animal advocacy, including philosophers Peter Singer and Tom Reagan, journalists Jim Mason and Anne Cottrell Free, anti-vivisectionists Theodora Capaldo and Sandra Ray Larson, Walter Kilroy and Robert Cummings of the MSPCA, and others. At the same time, the Animal Rights Network's Kim Stallwood and Jill Howard Church interviewed John Hoyt of the Humane Society of the US, Christine Stevens of the Animal Welfare Institute, veterinarian and theorist Michael W. Fox, and Roger Karras of the ASPCA. These interviews are archived, respectively, at Columbia University's Oral History Archives and the Animal Rights Archives at North Carolina State University. In the almost 2 decades since that work, many leading animal advocates from the 1960s, 1970s and 1980s have died. Shirley McGreal, Priscilla Cohn, Roberta Kalakowski, Bernard Rollin, and many others. CAF wants to ensure that the generation active at this time are recorded before they're too old or they die. Among those who are now in their 70s and 80s are Andrew Lindsay, Ingrid Newkirk, Carol Adams, Frances Moore-Lapay, and Joyce Tischler. Why does oral history matter? For Ken Shapiro, the president of the board of the Animals and Society Institute and one of the interviewers for the Recording Animal Advocacy Oral History Project, the role of the contemporary subfield of oral history is to give voice to individuals in marginalized groups that mainstream history has often overlooked. For Peter Singer, author of Animal Liberation, oral history can provide a vital lifeline, literally. In 1997, he writes, when Henry Spira told me that he had inoperable cancer, I flew from Melbourne to New York to video extensive conversations with him to capture this remarkable man's life and thoughts before he died, which he did in September 1998, the same month that I published Ethics into Action, Henry Spira and the Animal Rights Movement. For Carol Adams, the author of The Sexual Politics of Meat, oral history illustrates how animal advocacy is wrapped up in many other social movements, for abolition, suffrage, workers' rights, civil rights, and women's rights. We need the oral histories of animal advocates, she writes, because many of them see their work as part of this larger movement for change, and scholars of many disciplines will turn to these records to understand the connections that were being made. How I wish we had the oral history of suffragists who were also vegetarians. And for Joyce Tischler, oral history offers a distinctly different approach to capturing the impressions, joys, frustrations, and other feelings, and the thought processes experienced by the person being interviewed. Fortunately, the technology available today makes the task of interviewing and recording people much easier and cheaper. Also, fortunately, North Carolina State University's Animal Archives, now the largest in North America, are willing to make the recordings and transcripts available freely online to anyone who wishes to access them. CAF is also interested in using the Oral History Project itself as an example of intergenerational knowledge transfer, training young historians or activists to interview their elders. All in all, the Oral History Project will add immensely to scholarship, activism, and the archives of animal advocacy. As philosopher George Santayana wrote in The Life of Reason, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Join us in gathering the wisdom of the elders to make the future for animals a little brighter. Thank you.